I sent the divorce letter to my wife's work. I wanted her to know what she had done, to feel the weight of every word she wrote to me when she thought she was being discreet, when she thought her secret was safe. I sent the letter to let everyone know, your boss, your colleagues, the whole world. And she became desperate, frantically calling my cell phone, each call ignored with a cold smile on her face. She didn't know what to do, how to react to the humiliation of being exposed for a betrayal that she thought she controlled. But I was cruel. Cruel because for so long I was the fool in love, the devoted man who never saw what was right in front of his eyes. All that blind trust, the passionate kisses, the nights together, it was all a lie, a play where I was the only one who didn't know the script. After so many years, I was unable to believe that she was capable of something like that. We had a life built together, the kind of life I always imagined would be forever. I love you, she said. You are everything to me. Those words, repeated so many times, sounded like promises that I never imagined were false. I believed blindly, without questioning, without suspecting. Until the moment everything collapsed, like a house of cards in the wind. I remember how I started to get suspicious. Little things, deleted messages, smiles while looking at your phone, weird excuses for being late. But the last straw was one specific night. She left for a work meeting. She came back later, with a perfume that wasn't hers, a sparkle in her eyes that didn't belong to me. He told me that I was imagining things, that I was becoming paranoid. Maybe I was, but it was impossible to ignore instinct, that shiver that runs down your spine when you know something is wrong, even if you don't know exactly what. That's when I decided to investigate. I looked at every message, every email, and then, finally, I found what I was looking for. There it was, black and white, a torrent of messages exchanged with another man, words full of desire and secret promises. She was living a parallel life, and I was the last to know. I can still feel my stomach churning as I reread those messages, each one like a knife in the flesh, each one tearing apart what was left of the trust one had in her. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't be the same after that, I couldn't continue living as if nothing had happened. It was then that I planned my revenge. I thought of several ways to make her suffer, but I wanted it to be public, I wanted her to feel the same shame I felt. She was used to controlling everything, but this time, I would be the one who controlled the outcome of this story. The moment of delivery of the letter was as I imagined. In the middle of the day, the envelope being placed in your hands. His face changing from its usual smile to an expression of terror, his fingers shaking as he opened and read the words I had written. I described everything I knew, every detail of the case, every lie she had told me, and what I would do from now on. Each line was a sentence that condemned her to a new reality, a reality where she would be branded the traitor. She called me, of course. Please, can we talk? I can explain. An explanation, as if there was something that could explain what she did. I hung up. And then came a flood of messages, long texts where she played the victim, where she begged for my forgiveness. I read them all. And I deleted them all. I knew his professional life would be destroyed. She was always proud of being a strong woman, of having built her career with so much effort. But now, everyone at work knew what she had done. She was under the judgmental eyes of every person who, until that moment, respected her. I wanted her to feel every look, to know what it was like to be betrayed, betrayed by the respect she thought she had. However, fate has a peculiar way of repaying our actions. When you think you are in control, that you can direct the course of each event, something comes along that turns everything upside down. I thought my revenge would be the final point. I thought that by sending the letter I would have exposed everything that needed to be exposed, that she would be punished as she deserved. But then the unexpected happened. While she cried and despaired at the destruction of her reputation, the worst was yet to come. Things change when you discover that even your own friends, the ones who said they supported you, may be the first to turn their back on you. She, who had always prided herself on having solid friendships, began to see those same friendships evaporate. Every person who had once offered her comfort now avoided her. Your phone, once full of notifications, messages, and calls, became silent. Silence, that before seemed calm, was now a storm that suffocated her. And I watched everything from afar. With a mixture of satisfaction and pain that I never imagined I could feel. For a long time, I wondered if it was really worth it. If exposing your betrayal in this way really brought me the peace I was looking for. But the truth is that the void was still there, a hole that never seemed to be filled. And there's still something she doesn't know. Something that is about to change everything. Because sometimes, real karma isn't just losing what you have. It's realizing you never had anything to begin with. Welcome to the channel. Here, we never support any type of betrayal. The stories you will hear are fictional, but the message is clear: betrayal destroys lives, families, and hearts. So, get ready, because what's coming is a narrative full of twists, intense emotions, and a breathtaking ending. Enjoy the story, and hold on tight. The morning started like any other for Ethan. He woke up to soft light streaming through the windows of his Upper West Side apartment. The aroma of coffee already filled the kitchen, and the gentle melody of everyday life echoed in the hallways. Ethan had always been the kind of man who valued routine. As a successful lawyer in New York, he was proud to have built a stable and comfortable life for himself and his wife, Natalie. Natalie was different. Spontaneous, full of life and with a sparkle in her eyes that enchanted everyone around her. A woman who made friends easily, her laugh was contagious, and the way she could transform a gloomy environment into something full of energy was one of the things Ethan loved most about her. She was an interior designer, and her work reflected her personality, creative, elegant, and with bold touches. Her delicate hands brought life to every space she touched, and to Ethan, each of these creations was a reflection of the woman he had fallen in love with years ago. The couple seemed to have a perfect life. Candlelit dinners on Friday nights, impulsive weekend trips to the beach house in the Hamptons, and that undeniable chemistry every couple wishes they had. But like many couples, the daily grind had a way of weakening connections. Ethan's work demanded more and more of him. Sleepless nights reviewing documents, endless meetings, and work trips began to become more frequent. Natalie, in turn, dove headfirst into her career, receiving more projects and building a network of contacts that made her feel alive and fulfilled. Still, there was genuine affection between them. Ethan's every gesture was meticulous. He made sure to send her romantic messages throughout the day, little reminders that he was always thinking about her. Natalie, in turn, liked to prepare surprises, a special dinner or an unexpected gift, as proof of her love for him. But there was something subtle that was beginning to emerge. Little moments of uncomfortable silence, when before there was only laughter. Long looks into the void, where there was once complicity. There were days when Natalie seemed distant, looking out the window as if she were looking for something that even she didn't know what it was. "Is everything okay?" Ethan asked, trying to reach that point where the connection seemed to have been lost. "Yes, just thinking about the next project," she replied, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan worried, but chose to believe it was just the stress of work. On the other side, Natalie felt the weight of something she couldn't name. There was a restlessness inside her, a feeling that despite having everything, something was missing. Ethan's love was palpable, but his absence at crucial moments began to create a distance. He was a devoted husband, but lately work had taken most of his attention. She understood the importance of Ethan's career, but the loneliness that accompanied her on many silent, lonely nights left her questioning where she fit in this world of achievements and busy schedules. And then there was that night. The night that, without both of them realizing it, marked the beginning of an imperceptible change. An elegant dinner, a gala event that Natalie went to alone because Ethan was stuck with a last-minute meeting. The atmosphere was glamorous, full of important people, laughter and glasses of champagne sparkling in the soft light. It was the kind of event where Natalie felt at ease, connecting with people, receiving praise for her work. But that night, something was different. She met Ryan, a charismatic businessman, a friend of one of Natalie's clients. He had a different energy, an attentive look, as if the world around him didn't exist when he spoke to her. Throughout the night, between business conversations and exchanges of laughs, there was something about Ryan that made Natalie feel seen. It was as if, for the first time in a long time, someone was truly present with her, noticing not just her appearance or her designs, but what lay beyond that, what she felt, her desires, her doubts. Ryan's intense gaze was hard to ignore. As he talked about his own dreams and challenges, Natalie felt a connection she hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't just the charm, but a sense of freedom, an innocent flirtation that seemed harmless. At the end of the night, Ryan lightly touched Natalie's hand as they said goodbye. "It was a great conversation," he said, with a smile that made her shiver. She just returned the smile, with an internal voice saying that it was just a passing moment, nothing more. When Natalie got home, Ethan was sitting on the couch, his eyes tired from another long day at the office. "How was the event?" he asked, without looking up from his laptop. "It felt good," she replied, trying to sound casual, but Ryan's touch still felt like it burned her skin. She approached Ethan, trying to ignore the strange feeling that followed her, and kissed him on the forehead. "I'm going to bed, it's been a long night." As Ethan reviewed his documents, he felt a pang of guilt. He knew he wasn't present like he was before. The routine was pushing them away, and he didn't know how to fix it. But he loved Natalie, he was sure of that, and he believed that eventually things would go back to normal. He just needed to close that big case at work, maybe plan a trip for them, and then, who knows, bring back that feeling of newness and love. Over the next few days, the dynamic between Ethan and Natalie continued to fluctuate. Small gestures of affection, but always with something unsaid hanging in the air. And, for Natalie, meeting Ryan became a memory that appeared in the most unexpected moments, in the middle of a meeting, while preparing dinner or listening to a song on the radio. She wondered why she was thinking about him, why that brief encounter seemed to have left such a deep mark. And that's how their lives continued, with Ethan trying to reconnect with a lost connection, and Natalie trying to understand the emptiness she felt. Both trapped in a cycle of silences and restrained gestures, unable to realize that something bigger was coming. Something that would forever change the course of their lives and reveal truths that they were far from imagining. It was just the beginning of something neither of them were prepared to face. In the days following their meeting at the gala, Natalie tried to ignore the growing uneasiness she felt. Ryan's messages started out subtle, comments about their night, about how much he enjoyed talking to her. And although she was hesitant at first, Natalie eventually responded. Talking to him was easy, and it made her feel young again, alive in a way she hadn't experienced in years. That feeling of being noticed, desired, was like an elixir to which she found herself trapped. Meanwhile, Ethan remained immersed in his work, working overtime to finish the case that had been taking so much of his energy. He tried to convince himself that he was building something for their future, a future where there would be no financial worries, just time to enjoy together. This was how he justified his absences, his delays and his tiredness when he got home. When Natalie was expecting him for dinner, he would often cancel with a brief message, and she would pretend she didn't care. "It's just a phase," she told herself. But the messaging routine between Natalie and Ryan evolved. She found herself smiling when she heard the sound of her cell phone vibrating, eager for a new notification. Little by little, the conversations went from a simple exchange of ideas to something more intimate. Ryan made her laugh, made her feel seen, and the reality of her life with Ethan seemed to fade every time a new message appeared on the screen. He started talking about casual meetings, a coffee here, a lunch there. And even though she knew she should resist, she accepted. She didn't want to admit to herself what that meant, but the flirtation, the mystery, and the danger kept her connected to him, like a magnet that was impossible to shake off. One afternoon, while Ethan was stuck in a meeting that stretched into the evening, Natalie met up with Ryan at a low-key cafe. She felt nervous, like a teenager on a first date, a mix of excitement and guilt. Ryan was there, smiling, sure of himself. Sitting at the table, they talked for hours, time passing too quickly, as if the outside world didn't exist. He talked about his plans, about trips he would like to take, and asked her about her dreams, her desires. And each answer seemed to bring them closer together. At the end of the date, Ryan approached her, holding her hand. "I think about you a lot, you know," he whispered, his voice low and soft, with an intensity that made Natalie catch her breath. She wanted to respond, but the words wouldn't come out. It was as if she had been hypnotized by him, by that moment that seemed suspended in the air. Then he kissed her. And in that instant, she felt like she was falling, but without worrying about landing. As the days passed, meetings between Natalie and Ryan became more frequent. The fear of being discovered was suppressed by the desire to be together. Natalie tried to keep up appearances at home, being the caring wife she always was, but her mind was divided. Ryan filled the space she felt empty, a space she didn't know existed until she found him. And Ethan, in the rush of work, didn't notice the small changes, the way Natalie dressed up more than usual, her sudden departures, her increasingly elaborate excuses for spending the day out. However, like every secret, the truth was destined to be discovered. Ethan has always trusted Natalie, but something inside him bothers him. There was a growing distance he couldn't ignore, a feeling that something was slipping through his fingers. One night, when he arrived home earlier than expected, he found Natalie sitting on the couch, cell phone in hand, laughing about something that clearly wasn't meant for him. She tried to hide the phone, hide her smile, but the discomfort was evident. "Who are you talking to?" he asked, trying to sound casual, but his heart was pounding in his chest. "Ah, it's just a friend," she lied, looking away. Ethan wanted to believe it, but something inside him whispered that it wasn't so. The next few days were marked by increasing tension. Ethan, increasingly suspicious, began to observe Natalie more closely. His trips to work meetings became more and more frequent, and the excuse that he was spending time with friends no longer made sense to him. Until, one night, while she was sleeping, Ethan decided to take Natalie's cell phone. His hands shook as he unlocked the device and began looking at the messages. And there it was. Every word, every conversation, every photo exchanged with Ryan, and every meeting detailed. Confirmation of what he already feared, but didn't want to believe. She was cheating on him. It was as if the ground had disappeared. Ethan felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and a despair he had never experienced before. He looked at the woman he loved, sleeping peacefully beside him, and could barely recognize the person she had become. That night he couldn't sleep. And when Natalie woke up, she didn't notice the look of pain and disgust on Ethan's face, she just went about her routine, without suspecting anything. But Ethan had already made a decision. He knew he couldn't let this go. He knew he would need to act, and it wouldn't just be a simple conversation about betrayal. There would be consequences, and Natalie would soon know that the love she believed to be safe, protected, was about to fall apart. What she didn't know was that everything was about to become public. And that the letter he was writing at that moment, the same letter that would seal their fate, would be the beginning of a storm that would leave irreversible marks. Natalie had no idea what was about to happen that morning. Everything seemed normal, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, Ethan's touch on his shoulder as he left for work, seemingly distracted as always. But that same afternoon, everything would change. Ethan knew the confrontation was inevitable. After discovering Natalie's messages with Ryan, her betrayal was no longer in doubt. He had proof, he had a plan. For days, he resisted the urge to explode, to confront her directly, to demand answers. But instead, he remained calm, waited. And then, he decided to act in a calculating manner. The clock struck just after 3 in the afternoon when Natalie received an envelope in her office. She was in the middle of a presentation for an important client, and one of her assistants rushed in, interrupting the meeting. "Sorry, but this just arrived, they said it was urgent," the assistant said, handing over the envelope with an apologetic look. Natalie, not understanding the urgency, smiled at the customer and asked for a minute. His mind was far from any suspicion, perhaps it was something related to one of the ongoing projects. But as soon as he opened the envelope and saw the contents, his heart stopped. It was a divorce letter, signed by Ethan, with a note attached: "I hope it was fun while it lasted. Now all your colleagues will know who you really are." Her eyes darted across the page, and reality crumbled around her. There was the formal divorce petition, the terms established by Ethan, and, most devastating of all, details of the betrayal with Ryan described in minute detail. She felt the client's eyes on her, the murmur of curiosity from her colleagues. Shame washed over her like a wave, and her face turned pale. With hands shaking, she gathered her belongings and left the room quickly, trying to hide the tears that were already beginning to well up. Upon arriving home, Natalie found Ethan sitting at the table, his expression somberly calm. "Why did you do that, Ethan? Couldn't you just talk to me? Why expose everything like that?" she screamed, her voice breaking between anger and pain. She expected him to be shaken, for his voice to shake, for him to show some emotion, but Ethan just looked at her coldly. "Talk? How you talked to me while you cheated on me? How you looked into my eyes, kissed me, while hiding what you did with Ryan, isn't that his name?" he said, without raising his voice, but with an intensity that cut the air. "You destroyed our marriage, Natalie. You broke everything, and I'm done being the idiot who believed your lies." His words hit her like blows. She tried to defend herself, to justify her feelings of loneliness, the emptiness she felt, but she knew that there were no excuses that could erase what she had done. Ethan then stood up, approached her with his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and determination. "I loved you. I loved you more than anything in this world, and yet you chose to destroy that. I could have talked to you, screamed at you, kicked you out of this house. But I chose to be cruel, just the same. The way you were with me." Natalie sat on the floor, feeling the weight of the world crashing down on her. He never thought Ethan could do something like this. He was always the restrained, calm, rational man. Now this all felt like a mask that had fallen. "You destroyed my life, Natalie. You destroyed our life. I don't want to see you anymore. I don't want to hear your voice anymore," he said, turning his back on her and leaving the apartment. And then, silence. A silence that seemed to swallow all the hope that remained. In the days that followed, Natalie tried to find Ethan, tried to explain how she felt, tried to look for some sign that he might reconsider. But all attempts were in vain. Ethan disappeared completely, blocking all her calls, ignoring every message. For her, the worst of all was not the judgment of her colleagues or the loss of her professional reputation, it was Ethan's complete indifference. She knew she had made a terrible mistake, but the way he chose to deal with it felt like the ultimate punishment. And then came the worst blow of all. One rainy afternoon, while Natalie was sitting alone at home, the phone rang. It was her mother, with a deep, hesitant voice. "Natalie, honey, we need to talk. Something happened." Natalie could feel the urgent tone in her mother's voice. "What's wrong? Tell me soon, Mom," she replied, anxiety already burning her stomach. "Your father, we found out that your father was fired," the mother said, her voice shaking. "He lost his job because of something they said about you." It was as if the world had stopped spinning. His father, who had always been the pride of the family, a man of integrity, respected in his career, was now unemployed. All because of her betrayal, all because of how the story had been exposed, spread like a virus. Natalie could hardly believe it. Her father has always been her biggest support, he always believed in her, he was always proud of her achievements. And now, he was paying the price for his choices. But how did this happen? she whispered, almost unable to speak. The company, they found out about you, about what you did. And they decided he couldn't continue working there, to maintain the company's reputation, the mother replied, the weight of sadness evident in every word. It was then that Natalie finally understood the depth of the consequences of her actions. It wasn't just her marriage that was in shambles. Her betrayal had hurt people she loved, had ripped away from them the security they valued so much. And in the midst of all the pain, she realized that there was no way to fix this, there was no going back. That night, sitting alone in the room she once shared with Ethan, Natalie held her phone, looking at his number. She wanted to say she was sorry, she wanted to explain that she hadn't imagined things would get to this point. But she knew that words wouldn't be enough, that nothing could change what she had caused. And across town, Ethan looked out at the night through a hotel room window. He knew Natalie was suffering, knew her revenge had been cruel and relentless. But there was a part of him that couldn't feel remorse. She had destroyed his heart, and now, her life was torn apart. He felt an emptiness, a deep sadness, but also a bitter satisfaction in knowing that Natalie was reaping the consequences of her choices. Little did he know that her fall was far from over. Natalie sank into a melancholic daze after her mother's phone call. He spent his days like a ghost, wandering through the rooms of the empty apartment, where before there was love, laughter, and complicity. She wondered how things got to this point, how she allowed her own actions to cause such destruction. Guilt was like a constant shadow, hovering over every thought, every memory. And as time passed, the void left by Ethan only grew. After the news of her father's dismissal, Natalie knew she had crossed a line from which she could not return. Not only had he destroyed his marriage, but he had dragged his entire family into the abyss of his betrayal. Her father, who had always been her stronghold, now found himself without a job, without prospects, and she was the cause of everything. He felt as if every step he took added weight to his shoulders, making it impossible to find a way out. But she knew she needed to try to repair at least some of the damage. He called his mother countless times, begging to speak to his father. He refused, always saying that he didn't want to hear his daughter's voice, which, to him, was now a stranger. Each refusal was like a blade piercing his heart, cutting away a piece of his hope. "I'll make this work again, Mom, I promise," she said, her voice low, trying to convince herself as much as her mother. Meanwhile, Ethan kept his distance from everything. Even after revealing Natalie's betrayal in such a calculating way, he refused to admit to himself that he still loved her. But what he felt was a dangerous combination of satisfaction and bitterness. He wondered how Natalie was dealing with the pain of being exposed, how she was feeling realizing that her choices had ruined not only her marriage but also her career and family. It was as if he had watched a storm of his own creation destroy everything, and now he was just looking at the wreckage. However, the lonely nights at the hotel were starting to take a toll. Every silence, every moment without company, was a reminder of what he'd lost. He felt a growing anger at himself for, deep down, still caring. "I should be free," he said to himself, looking up at the ceiling of the dark room. But he couldn't shake the pain, he couldn't erase the memories of the happy times they had together. He felt like he was stuck at a crossroads, torn between the need for revenge and the desire for everything to go back to the way it was before. It was then that Ryan reappeared. That man who, without knowing it, had been the trigger for all the ruin. He appeared on Natalie's doorstep one night, wet from the rain, as if the weather reflected the inner turmoil they both felt. "I heard what happened. I heard everything," he said bluntly, his eyes fixed on hers. Natalie didn't have the strength to send him away. Part of her felt angry, blaming him for all the pain she now carried. But another part felt comforted by his presence, by someone who knew the mess that was his life and didn't judge. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured, her voice emotionless, tired. "I know. But I feel like I need to be," Ryan replied, walking in slowly, closing the door behind him. For a few moments, they sat in silence, just staring at each other, two strangers connected by a web of bad choices. She wanted to push him away, to scream, to blame him for everything that was happening. But when he pulled her towards him, enveloping her in a tight hug, she relented. There was something about his presence that made her forget, even if for a moment, the chaos around her. Ryan's touch was familiar, but it didn't offer the peace she sought. As he stroked her hair, as his lips touched hers, Natalie felt an even greater emptiness open up in her chest. She knew that wasn't the answer to her pain, that he couldn't fill the hole left by Ethan. And yet, she held on to that moment, because it was the only thing she had. But, unlike what had happened before, now Ryan was just a temporary consolation, an escape from a reality that consumed her. The love she had felt for him, if that was love, had turned into something different, a bitter reminder that her choices had consequences. And Ethan, in turn, began to realize something he wasn't prepared to admit. As time passed and the initial anger dissipated, he felt a bigger hole opening up inside him. It wasn't just about what Natalie had done, but about what he had lost. She wasn't just a traitor, she was also the woman he loved, the woman he imagined spending the rest of his life with him. And now, she wasn't there. One night, as Ethan stared into space, he realized that his revenge had not freed him. On the contrary, it tied him even more to the past, to the pain. And he wondered, too late, if there was a way to start over. What if, he thought, but the words died in his mind. There was no going back, there was no erasing what happened. Natalie's betrayal, her own desire for revenge, all of it had destroyed something that could never be rebuilt. Natalie wondered what she would do from there. She knew she needed to stand up, face the life she had chosen, deal with the consequences of her actions. But somehow the guilt, shame, and loneliness felt insurmountable. She wondered if she would ever be able to forgive herself, if she would ever be able to look at herself in the mirror and not just see a woman who had lost everything. And so, as the rain beat against the windows and the wind whistled through the apartment's empty hallways, the two wondered if there was any way to find some kind of peace. Both found themselves trapped in a cycle of pain, regret and unanswered questions. But they knew that, one way or another, the story was far from over. There was still one decision to be made, one last conversation, one last chance to try to understand what really brought them to that point. And with that, the end, whatever it was, would finally be in sight. The rain stopped that Sunday morning, and the sun slowly illuminated Natalie's empty apartment, filling the corners previously shrouded in shadow with light. After weeks of uncertainty and suffering, she finally made a decision. She needed to face Ethan, talk to him face to face, even if that was the last time their eyes would meet. I needed to say I was sorry, even if it didn't change anything. I couldn't continue living with the weight of all the words I never said. Ethan, on the other hand, had already decided that he needed to close that chapter too. Ever since he left the apartment and disappeared from her life, a part of him had been suspended in the past, unable to move forward. He knew that Natalie had made a mistake, that she had hurt him in a way that could never be erased. But as the days went by, he realized he was holding on to the pain like an anchor, and he didn't know if he wanted to continue being held hostage by it. It was Natalie who took the initiative to find Ethan. She called, asked to meet at the same cafe where, years ago, they met. There was something poetic about that meeting, starting where it all began, even if the end was lurking. When she arrived, Ethan was already there, sitting at a table in the back, looking distant. He looked tired, but different. As if he had aged years since the last time she saw him. "Thank you for coming," she said, sitting across from him. The tension hung in the air like a heavy curtain, difficult to pull away. Ethan just nodded, a small gesture, but one that she accepted as the most kindness he could offer her at that moment. "I don't know what you want to tell me, Natalie," he said finally, his voice low but firm. "I don't know if anything you say will change what happened." She swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. I need you to know that I'm sorry. For what I did, for the way I treated you. I know I can't fix things, but I wanted you to know that." I never meant to hurt you. I was wrong, Ethan. And I understand if you never forgive me. There was a long silence. Ethan watched her, trying to see beyond the words, beyond the regret she wore on her face. For a long time he waited to hear those words, but now that they finally left her lips, he didn't feel the satisfaction he thought he would. You destroyed something I thought was inviolable, he said, his gaze locked with hers. I loved you, Natalie. More than anything. And even now, when I look at you, a part of me still does. But I don't know if I can go back. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to tell you that I'm sorry. For a moment, they just stared at each other, two people who knew each other so intimately but now seemed like complete strangers. And then, Ethan got up, pulled on his coat, and placed a bill on the table to pay for the 2 coffees that were left untouched. I'll move on, Natalie. And I hope you find some form of peace. But I need to say goodbye. She felt her heart shatter at those words. But I knew it was necessary. And when he walked away and left the cafe, she knew that this was the end of everything they had been, of everything they could have been. Meanwhile, Ryan disappeared from Natalie's life again. The romance the two shared was buried under the weight of the consequences. He left the city, moving away from the chaos and guilt that, in some way, he also felt. For Ryan, the affair with Natalie was a bitter memory, a mistake he was determined to forget. And just as he entered her life, he left, without leaving a trace. As for Natalie, life didn't get any easier after that final encounter with Ethan. Her father never forgave her, the relationship between them became an open wound that never healed. She lost not only her marriage but also the respect and support of her family. He decided to start from scratch, away from everything and everyone, away from memories and mistakes. She moved to another city, looking for a fresh start, something that still seemed distant, but for which she was willing to fight. Ethan, for his part, was finally able to move on. It wasn't easy. He needed time to heal, to understand that the forgiveness he needed was not for Natalie, but for himself. He needed to free himself from the hurt, the anger that consumed him. And little by little, he found new ways to live, new people to meet, new reasons to smile. But both, in one way or another, would forever carry the marks of that history. The love they shared, the bond that seemed unbreakable, the betrayal that destroyed everything, it was all part of them, of their memories, of their scars. And in the end, they followed different paths, but with one certainty: betrayal doesn't just destroy marriages, it destroys lives, dreams, and what could have been a future. What did you think of the story? Leave your comment and share your opinion. Subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories, full of real emotions, deep dilemmas and surprising endings. And remember, here, we do not support any type of betrayal. The stories are fictional, but the moral is always the same: value the people you love and be true to who you are. Until the next story.